everyone. In today's video, we're going to be taking a look at a couple different ways how you can sort of take sort of a real-world image and convert it into yummy targets to drop all sorts of fun ordnance on. But before I get too carried away with that, I read a really funny comment that says I'm not a real person, and I love that because there's no pictures of me. And the reason there's no pictures of me is because I teach and you can't really have a social media presence if you're a public school teacher. That doesn't go well for you. Anyway, so let's get started. So there's a couple different ways we can do this. And we're sitting here in a lovely Rhode Island. And some people, what they do is there's some external tools you can use for this, which work really, really well. Some people, what they like to do is just kind of a mishmash, slam things down here. But there's two basic ways that I like to assemble target bases, so to speak. The first method, what I like to do is to use my open topo map like we have right here, which is actually pretty groovy. And the neat thing about this, of course, is this is going to give us the buildings. The downside of this, of course, is when you start doing one of these and you get a little zoomy, then you get a little zoomy out, everything disappears, and you zoom in, and you're trying to get the right levels. If you're going to use the open topo map, which I prefer for this, just do yourself a quick favor and make sure everything's shut off except the open topo map, which is going to make it a little bit easier to do. So the next thing we're going to do, of course, is we're going to go ahead and try to figure out what these buildings are. Now, if we don't know what the buildings are because we're not there, we don't want to go jump into Google Earth or something along those lines, that's perfectly fine because you can actually take advantage of a lot of the stuff that's already built into Command to do this. And let me show you what I mean. So let's pick on this building right here. This one right here looks probably a 3-story if I had to put a quick guesstimate on it. And if I switch to my distance measuring tool, I can actually measure how long that is. Now, it's very difficult to see, but it actually says it's about 80 meters across. Now, that's useful for us because if I go up to my database viewer real quickly, if I were to go over here to facility and I type in, let's see here, what do we want? I think we said medium. We'll go ahead and do that first. Medium building, or if you want to, you can just type in building or structure again, depending on what kind of thing you were trying to do here. Looks good to me. It's not a communication. I said a barracks, right? I said about 80 meters across. Scrolling down here, I can see the length of this building is about 60 meters. So that's just a little bit on the small side for what we're doing here. If I go up to my large building here, I can see that this is about 70 meters. This is actually much, much better. And the width is about right. So we've actually found our target building here. This is item 115 here. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to press my little insert key, click roughly in the center of that building, go up to facility. Come in here, and I'm just going to go ahead and type in, what did we say? I think it was large building. So just come in here, grab my building up. Very large. There's also very large if you need it. Press okie doke, and boop, just like that. Now, here's the cool thing here. I can specifically name that building something, but if it's going to be a particular target, we don't need to. We could come in here, of course, and let me go ahead and duplicate that because I see there's a very large building up here. This one's probably going to be medium. That one's also going to be large. But what you can do is just have some fun. Is you can say command building, kind of a thing like that, even though it's not a bunker or anything like that. You can come over here and you've got another building large here, and you can say, officers' quarters, officers' ward, something along those lines. And again, you can go very, very serious as far as naming the individual buildings. Where things start to get a little more interesting when you're going through this process, of course, everything's all glitchy. Oh, I pressed the T key. Be careful the T key, by the way. Is when you end up with little guys like this. I can measure this across real quickly here, and I'm getting about 10 meters. When it comes to 10-meter buildings, of course, usually that's when I like to interpret what it could be. So what I'll do is I'll come in here, I'll type in something like mast. You can get a nice little TV mast, grab a little structure mast here, toss that one right here. Going over to here, again, this could be like a little generator, sort of a thing like that. And you could sort of build it. The little buildings is kind of, I almost say accoutrement on that. You can kind of go for the rest of it. Once in a while, of course, as you're assembling all these different components and starting to kind of fill in all these buildings, sort of matching their size, you're going to get to a point where you're like, oh, what if they overlap each other? They're not going to overlap each other as long as you kind of put them in the middle. The other thing you'll face, of course, is get huge structures like this. And of course, you can tell, right, just by looking that we're looking at a rail yard right now. So the nice thing is I can come in here, or we can say a rail depot or something like that. Actually, you have to type in depot properly if you actually wanted to get it to work. D-E-P-O-T. Depot. Of course, we have a vehicle depot. I'm just going to make this one generic. The other thing you can do, too, is do a rail station for those of you who are a little more conventional. Either one, that's the one. Structure railway yard. I knew I could find it. So again, you could sort of build this. And if you're asking how I know this, just take a look right here. And anybody who plays Factorio knows what this little connection is right there. So what we would do is we'd slowly build that structure up, kind of going one at a time, kind of going through until we've populated everything. Now, let's say we've built our base here. And again, let me go ahead and fast forward. There we go. Now everything's looking pretty good there. So we have ourselves our little structures. Everything's ready. I've labeled in here. I've actually recognized one of the antenna symbols there, so I actually toss an antenna there again. Those little details like that make these things so much more fun when you do it. So one of the things I like to do when I'm done is I like to grab everything and go ahead and group that real quick. Now, a lot of times when people group things, you get this frustrating situation where this kind of thing happens, and this gets really, really frustrating for folks because basically it decides that's where the center of the group is. So if you want to fix that, you can just hit the F4 real quick, and you can actually come here, and you can actually define what the main one is. So if I reset this and make this one my command base, this one becomes the center. I see this little building right here is more in the middle, if that makes sense. So I can actually set that one as the group lead. So now when I close away, you'll notice the center of my little structure of buildings right now is now this base. Railway base uno, why not? Make it nice and simple. So after I do that part, of course, one of the things I like to do to try to kind of take it to the next level is I always love to populate certain vehicles or where things would be inside the base. And usually a lot of times I'll keep this as a separate unit. And the reason I like to do this is it just makes it a little bit easier. But let me show you a really cool trick too. I'm going to press the 9 key on my numpad. I'm going to grab all of this, shift right click. I'm just going to go ahead, scenario editor. I'm going to make them not auto detectable. The reason I've done that is it makes it much, much more fun for people to actually identify things from the air, if you get my drift there. So what I'm going to do now is I always like to look for anything that looks like it could be a parking spot. And things for parking spots, fortunately, because OpenStreetMap does such a nice job here, you can actually see a lot of little spots like these little kind of parking areas. And again, there's somebody sitting here going, I work there, don't blow that up. And it's kind of one of those kind of little dead end streets. And I always like try to kind of guess. So I can come in here, I can type in depot here. We can use the proper truck depot this time because that makes a little bit more sense. And of course, if you want to have a little bit of fun, I've actually seen people do things like this where they'll do actual parking spots. One of the things you may or may not have known, but let's say I want to grab myself a pretty small medium aircraft here. Let's say that this particular parking spot, I'm just going to move it to the middle here. If I actually press Control F6 on this, I can actually add an airplane to this. So if I wanted to, I could put an Mi-24, which would be the correct thing to add to it for whatever reason. There's one of these in Cape Cod today. It's too small. Fine. All right, let's remove that and let's add an SH2F because why not? SH2, we'll do United States Navy. Boop. Press OK. Press OK. Don't worry, it's going to yell at you. But believe it or not, that helicopter is actually sitting there on that runway. Actually, very much like that picture that you can see in the upper right corner. So the other thing I like to do too, whenever I do that, is just kind of sprinkle in some little vehicles in here. One thing you could do is like we could pretend come over here. We could type in car, for example. And when you type in car, you've got all sorts of fun things. You have like a little car park. Again, we could do this sort of thing if we wanted to simulate that as a little car park there. One of the things we have too is we have a railway yard right here, so we could actually come in here. And even though we can't technically do this, we can technically do this, but you can come in here and actually add some train engines. So I could add a couple of these and do one of these things kind of across there like that. So we have a train engine. Let's come over here. I don't think we can do straight locomotive. I don't think in this version. Take it back. So we can go ahead and stick a locomotive right there. And if we wanted to, we could do, and we could even get really technical and come in here and say switcher, kind of a thing like that, if you want to get that technical. But a lot of times people view these as targets. They don't view them as, oh, what's the railway number on that particular unit? That's just not how these things usually go. But again, this is just how I generally set these things up to make a nice, yummy target. So when that's all done, the other thing I like to do is kind of sprinkle in some military vehicles where it makes sense to me. Like for me, I'm just looking around this real quickly. If they have like a really short range radar or something like that, one of the things I'll do is I'll come over here. Let's come in here and type in radar and get ourselves sort of a generic short range one. You got plenty of like the MPQs and stuff like that, which works really, really well. And one of the things you can do too is you can type in generic. And then when you scroll down to generics, let's see here, building. We don't want a building. We want to come right in here. Here we go. You can see you could actually plop down a generic 2D air search radar that's kind of short range. And you can just park it right there. And again, I always like to keep it ungrouped so I can just flip this sucker on. So now we have just sort of a general search radar here. And if you wanted to get technical, you could come in here. Notice this is just a generic one. If you want to add a specific flavor in there, or you want to add like an HFDF or something like that. I love coming in here and setting this like this and then typing the word generic. And the reason why is they have so many great little things in here that you can come in here. You can put some ESM. Maybe there's a little like kind of communication center or something like that they're kind of like listening and all sorts of different stuff. Get some mass int if you want to be really, really simple. We can do, of course, a mobile jammer. We can put a navigation radar. Like I said, there's so many great things. And one of the most amazing parts of this game is so much of this stuff is in here. And I just love that. Let's see here. I'm going to go down to generic real quick here. Yeah, here we go. And you can see there's ASA radars, there's coastal surveillance, battery radars. There's so many different tools in here. And of course, if I wanted to, I could type in height. It would be HF, would be a Huff Duff. We have to be careful which one we have. But again, you can come in here and find any of these. Let's see here. I just want a odd group. PRV, we'll do an odd group. It could be odd pair. Either one of these are height finders. I'll toss that one in there too. Because why not? So now we have ourselves our little kind of radar here. And then we just got to populate a couple vehicles. Come up to Riley Street here. And by the way, you can always press the 9 key in the numpad too if you have to. Come up here, drop that one. We can now say BMP2. Oh, why not? Grab this one, say Soviet Union. Why not? So we'll come over here. We'll say that there's a couple T-64s over here. T-64s, because T-64s are such a dumb tank. We'll make them that one too, because why not? We'll assume that somebody put in a Zeus over here, ZSU-23. Sheikah, so put this one down here. Looks pretty good to me. Gotta have a little bit of organic air defense kind of a thing. Again, he's just sort of chilling there. And then I'd come over here, of course, and there's always that one jerk who has an SA-7 on his shoulder. It's just one of those things. There we go. Looks pretty good to me. So there we have a really nice looking little base. Now, where things get interesting here, and I always find this super fun, is when you shut all that good stuff off and you flip your base earth back on. Let me zoom out a little bit. It's not going to look so good because unfortunately all this is going to have to regenerate back into the program, which is basically kind of what it's doing right now. And we can grab our satellite image and we can actually zoom in here. Again, we've lost some resolution here, but that's okay because we have a really nice looking target now that's all convincing. And of course, it's right next to the airbase, so we could put the airbase in here and like have a beautiful, beautiful operational area here. Now, what I really, really enjoy about stuff like this, and let me go switch over to a blue team real quickly here. Let me grab myself something that's a little bit better at taking a look around in places like this real quick. Let's see here. We don't need a facility. We could grab a bunch of different units that we could use for this, but I'm going to use the U2 spy plane because we don't use them enough. Scroll on down here towards the bottom, U2R, U2S. I'll take the U2R. I like this version better because it's got SLAR in it, and SLAR is awesome. So I'm going to go ahead and do a pass over the top. I'm going to flip my SLAR on real quickly, side-looking airborne radar, and I'm going to go unpause. And this is what I love about this. Remember how we shut all those units off so that the units themselves weren't set up so they were auto-detectable? Now, the reason I love that is when we start cruising over the top here, our guy is actually going to do legitimate reconnaissance. Now, I know that sounds kind of like, oh, whoa, legitimate reconnaissance. What is this? But you'll notice here, I actually was able to spot that unit there. And if I press 9, we haven't actually spotted all the buildings here. And I just find that so fast. There it goes. See how I had to get within visual range? Now, if I actually click on this, and again, this is me just having fun because I can. Coming over here, you can see he actually detected it with the optical camera. Now, the real question is, how is he able to develop the film during flight? Shh. Nobody knows that. But that's a different issue for a different day. And the reason I love stuff like this is, let's say he turns around and starts going back to Connecticut here. Hey, turn around. Get out of here. Go. Get going. Now, all this information, of course, we can still see him, so we still have a pretty good way of sort of identifying these components. And keep in mind, since his camera can still see him, he still has the ability to have a look at him as he's going away. Now, if I flat out delete him right here, if I click on these guys, you'll notice it's detected by unknown. But look at this. Look at this. You'll notice that all the units here are now not confident. So it creates an awesome situation for you if you want to make a place where, for example, you want to make it so we have to detect the targets and then attack the targets with B-52s or something like that. It works so darn well. Now, there's another way to do this, and this is the part where everybody's like, wow, I spent a little amount of time there just to say there's another way to do it. And the other way to do this is you could do this randomly. And what I've actually done here, because I'm a bad person as always, is I went ahead and I played with ChatGPT, or actually this is a GPT-4 with Bing. You can do this with ChatGPT, by the way. And I basically wrote myself a script. And what the script does is it generates a grid centered on one particular location with some DBIDs of buildings that I wanted to use. So when we grab that script, I'm going to go ahead and take this one up. And don't worry, I'll pop that over there if you want to play with it. I simply put in my center coordinates where I want things to happen. I press the run button like that. I close my screen, and then I can see that I get the world's most precise grid in the middle of the Connecticut River here of all these cool buildings with all these different properties. Now, what I could do is I could actually come in here and change this. I can make them much closer together. But if you need to quickly populate, the entire country or an entire city, that is absolutely going to be the way to do it if that's what you're trying to do. Now, there are other ways to do this, of course. We could jitter everything a little bit if you wanted to. And yes, I know people are screaming, can I see the prompt you used? Okay, I'll go through it real slowly. My first prompt looks like this. Then I fixed it. Then I fixed it again. And then you have the final version. So that's just another great use of AIs for that particular purpose. I haven't done it with Gemini yet, but I'm definitely going to give it a try. And this will create a plausible looking base. And keep in mind, there are other ways to do it with heuristic models and stuff like that. But I'm not going to get into that level of depth here because once I start going that is like a 3.5-hour live stream where I show you all the powerful ways you could use that. Maybe something for a little bit later this year, but not just right now. Busy in the school year. Enjoy.